to Pike County and visited. And, that was something I'm incredibly grateful for our warden and using his relationship to get that door open. But then when I went there, I watched people walk out of the visitation room in tears, knowing that it was the last time they were going to see their family member. And, that hurts. And I only feel a small measure of hurt. This isn't my loved one, but I have 3 kids. I have family that I love deeply that I could never imagine saying goodbye to potentially for the rest of their life and my life. And that weight and that moment and that experience will stick with me for the rest of my life. More than a $16 minimum wage. I mean, I'm thankful for that, but it's not the same. And so, I don't regret it at all. I think it's the type of leader I want to be. And if people are offended by that or think I'm, too bold or out there and I shouldn't talk to issues, then they can elect somebody else. But as long as I'm in this seat, I'm going to use every lever I have to try to help my constituents when they have issues. And this was an issue that was unlike any other one that I've experienced.
All right. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining me. The name of the podcast is called Unmasked. And in this podcast, I'm curious about your story. How did you grow up, and also kind of know you beyond the marks that is seen.
Yeah.
So I know you as a commissioner.
Yeah.
And I'm curious about your life before you came in as a commissioner. Can you take me through who you are or how your upbringing?
Yeah, well, Robin, thank you for having me. And what a great idea for a podcast, Unmasked, because I do think in our world, wherever we go, we're all wearing masks of some kind. You know what I mean? In the sense of the way we show up at different places, right? And as a commissioner, obviously, I show up in a very professional capacity, you know what I mean? And I'm a pretty laid back person, but sometimes, being in that space, it's business, So a little bit about me. I was born in Palm Springs, California. So I was born all the way in California to a single mom. My, when she became pregnant, my biological dad left her, and I've never met my biological dad. She got married when I was 1 year old. So that's my real dad is what I say. He's my stepdad, but he's the dad who raised me and took care of me. And so my mom and dad then had 4 other children, and California, where we lived at the time, we lived in a trailer park there. So we weren't very wealthy. We weren't very, to do with, and in the sense of we didn't have resources. And my dad grew up in Indiana. And so we went to his family when I was 9 years old. We moved out there and grew up on a farm in Indiana. So it's a very different, if you know Palm Springs, it's resort. And then moved to Indiana and grew up on a farm there. So went to college in Southern Virginia, 2 degrees in religion, and became a pastor, and was a pastor for 20 years before getting into, elected office. And now I'm running for Congress. I could share a lot more. I'm married. My wife and I met in high school. So we've been dating since high school. We have 3 kids, 2 dogs, and we live in Conewago Township in Dauphin County. And I could share a lot more. Music was a big passion when I was in high school. I played in a lot of bands and stuff. I play guitar, drums, and bass. And I love music a lot. If you've been in my office, which you have, you've seen the record wall and all the, so yeah, that's a little bit about me, but I could go deeper into any of those. But yeah, that's a little bit of me unmasked.
You said you have 2 degrees in religion.
Yeah.
And I'm curious about your kind of interest in religion, and how did you get into that?
Yeah, so growing up, I grew up in a Christian family, and church was a big part of my upbringing. My parents, when we lived in California, my parents had both found religion and found Christianity, and it had a big impact on their life. And it was very important for them to raise myself and my siblings in that. So church was a regular part of my life growing up. In high school, I became very active in my youth group, which is kind of just the high school gatherings of the church. And became very close to my youth pastor, who was my mentor. He was my mentor till a few years ago when he passed away of cancer. But that, that relationship, that individual, and the opportunities I had to serve in high school really opened me up to a calling in ministry, and to go into that service oriented kind of way, which, I just felt very called into serving others, and church seemed like the best way to do that because that was what I had been most exposed to. And so went into that and was a high school youth pastor in Northern Virginia for a while. Then I did some community organizing in Boston with an organization, the Boston Project, that did some community organizing there around faith and around serving the community. And then moved to Wisconsin, where I was for 8 years with, that's where all three of our kids were born, in Wisconsin. And was a youth pastor there to start. And then when the lead pastor left, they asked me to step in and become lead pastor. So I was there for 3 or 4 years, I think a little over 3 years as the lead pastor. And then I had an opportunity to come to Hummelstown. And this would have been about 11 years ago, coming up on 11 years ago. So I've actually lived in Pennsylvania for the longest of my life. So I was in California for 9 years, Indiana for 9 years, and then traveling all over, and then Wisconsin for 8 years. But we've been here 11 years, and our family loves it. And yeah, I had the capacity to serve as a pastor here locally, and it's been fabulous to serve people in that capacity. I mean, pastors get the opportunity to see people at their highest highs and their lowest lows. You get to marry people, but you also have to grieve with families when they bury people. And, I've had all those experiences, and I think it makes me a better county commissioner, because being a county commissioner is just serving the community, and it's helped me in that. Really, I see being a county commissioner as much of what I did as a pastor, serving the community, continuing that, but not around religion, around, how we organize our communities to serve people.
If I'm to ask, like, what is religion for you, how would you respond to
that? Love. I would just say a love and care for others. I think, we can get into disagreements about all different types of religions, because every religion has different beliefs than others. But I think the thing that unites most religions is the principle of loving your neighbor, caring for the poor or the oppressed. The scriptures talk about something called the fruits of the Spirit, and they identify kind of what it looks like to be a follower of Jesus as love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. And so I try to live by those principles in my life, and do my best. I don't always get it right. I fail a lot at those things, because sometimes, life gets hard, and you got to return to those principles. But that's something that I try to formulate my life around.
And when you look at the world, we do hear or see people wearing the marks around religion and using the marks of a religion as their identity to other people, like the othering. Or, the othering can go into killing people and discriminating. And how do you reconcile, like, when you say love, religion is love, or love is religion for you? Like, how do you reconcile with people?
Yeah. So I think religion, like just about anything, can be co-opted for powerful people to use, and it has been historically. Like, one of the things that was interesting when I went to school was to study church history, and to see the history of things like the Crusades, where Christians, put swords to people's throats and said, "Convert or be killed." You know what I mean? And obviously that wasn't the approach that Jesus took, right, to converting people. And so we see all over the place. In many religions, we see people co-opting it from its original principles to applying their own principles. I can speak to my religion, which is Christianity, that, Christian nationalism is something we've seen in this country really grow over the last 10 years, which is basically just the idea that we should legislate at the federal level Christian principles that should govern our country. And I think our founders had in mind that every religion was welcome in this country, and we should continue to further that vision for what America can be. And, I don't want any preferential treatment, and I don't want to center my religion in the way I, lead as a political figure or as an elected official. I don't want to center Christianity. I want to say everyone's welcome at the table. Even people who have no faith are certainly welcome to the table, because my constituents come first,
Mhm. I'm curious about, you talk about power in religion,
Yeah.
and your shift from religion to politics,
Yeah.
which is also about power.
Yeah.
What was the transition about?
Yeah. So the transition was about serving people. I think as a commissioner, I'm able to serve people. I ran on a platform of prison reform, which is a way of serving people who are dealing with the consequences of incarceration and trying to give them a more dignified existence and, dignified ability post-incarceration as they reenter our communities, and trying to, make that experience more redemptive instead of retributive. And, I think power is a dynamic for anyone we give responsibility to. If you give someone the responsibility of governing, you're delegating them a certain amount of power. If you give a pastor a pulpit, they have power. If you give, anybody anything, they have power. My daughter just got her license, and so now she drives. She has a certain level of power that she didn't have. I think we should see how people use that power and determine, whether or not to continue to entrust power to them. And that is why America, being a democracy and being able to vote people in or out based on how they've, used the levers of power, that I think is unique to, the way we're supposed to be working in that. And look, when it comes to power, there's a few things that guide my view of power, because most people who are powerful and misusing their power, I would actually say, are unaware of it. And so I have a lot of people in my life that when they speak to me or when they challenge me because maybe I'm doing something inappropriate, or maybe I'm going too far, or maybe I'm being too harsh, I have certain people in my life that can speak to me very boldly and bluntly and let me know that if that's happening. But there's some principles that guide my view. Look, the writer James says, true religion is caring for the widows and the orphans. Religion isn't this idea of just, showing up to church on a Sunday. It's actually the actions and what you do. And then Jesus, in his temptations, when he's in the desert and he's tempted, one of the things that Satan tempts him with is giving him control of all the nations and giving him the powers of like a king. And, I think it's interesting that was one of the temptations that Jesus went through. And, we should see whenever we're entrusted power as the potential for it to become a temptation to misuse. And so I think it's about our leaders being aware of how they hold their power. Do they use their power to unite communities or to divide communities? Do they use their power to strengthen themselves or to strengthen their constituents? These are all things that I think I try to find ways to delegate that power and authority in a way that helps other people grow and helps other people thrive in our communities.
Do you think, as a human being, we are
Yeah.
capable of being aware of our power and its impact?
Not always. Not always. I think there's moments of awareness, and if we're open to it, we can receive it. But I think it's something we should constantly be going back to. And in the sense of like, we should constantly be questioning our motives around making decisions, our desires, our...
Can you take me through your own process? Like, how do you check and balance your own power?
Yeah. So I have, like I said already, people that can speak to me very boldly and bluntly that are in my life that I've built relationships with that know me very well. They typically are the first to see when I'm unhealthy. And, and I don't mean unhealthy in just like a physical way, but I mean like when I'm operating more emotionally, or I'm, tired, or, just making a poor decision because I'm frustrated. And I find for me, some of the times when power becomes an issue is around when I am tired or frustrated, or feel a sense that, I've been fighting for something for a long time and it's just not happening. And instead of trusting the process and continuing to broaden the group around me that's bringing something forward, it can feel like, you just want to exert power instead of building influence and building bridges. And then I would say, my personal practice is certainly, I think last year I did yoga for 200 days of the 365 days of the year. So like I have a 30-minute yoga routine that I do. I have a mat that I roll out at my house. It started because I'm a CrossFitter. So I do workouts, under the banner of CrossFit, which are very high intensity workouts and lifting a lot of weights. And so, yoga started for me as really just about the physical, in the sense of trying to give my muscles relief and stretch and do that. But it became a practice of like me putting my phone down, having 30 minutes of the day without a device in front of me, trying to focus on my breathing. There was some breathing techniques that I do sometimes during that kind of help me to just disconnect, because there's so much that I'm connected to between my work email, my campaign email, all the events that I need to be at. I have a family. I have 3 kids. I'm coaching my kid in basketball right now. There's so much going on that like, all of those distractions can keep you unaware of what's happening internal. And so, that's probably the practice that I do the most. And then other times when I'm driving in the car, sometimes I like to listen to music. And sometimes certain songs help me be more reflective and help me be more aware of myself. And so I have some of those. I have a playlist that I'll play if I'm feeling like I need to kind of just put some of this music on and kind of, I'm about to drive 30 minutes to something. I need to take some time to just not answer any texts or phone calls that come in and just kind of relax,
You said service was the main, the driver for you to move from religion to politics.
Mm-hmm.
And service was the main driver for you in the religion.
Yeah.
You could, instead of staying in religion because it's the same goal. Why politics?
Well, I feel like in our country right now, we're dealing with a crisis in politics. I think we're dealing with a crisis of, people not standing up for the right things. And I felt strongly that, I had the ability to use the experiences that I had had with many people to advocate for things that I didn't see leaders advocating for. I knew many people who had family members that were incarcerated, and even now in this role, over the last 2 years, I've got to know many people from many different places who are dealing with different challenges and ways in which the government can serve them better. Obviously the Bhutanese Nepali community is one of those that, our experience last year with the, detentions and deportations, but I could speak to a lot of different community issues that I couldn't speak to when I was a pastor in this role. And I can also help ensure that resources get to the places where they need to be to help people and to make a difference. And so I don't see it as, in some ways I left being a pastor. That's true. But I think that a similar line of work continued. And, the church that I was a pastor at, we now have a great pastor. Her name's Haley, and she's taken that and continued the work that I was doing there. And I'm always there and available as a support for her. So it's also helped elevate other leaders to step up into those positions and roles that I used to hold.
And when you said we're dealing with the crisis in this country right now, can you elaborate more on that?
Look,
what are we doing?
So in 2016, I was a pastor, and obviously we saw the rise of our current president at that time. And we saw a level of anger in politics and name calling and ways of just retributive type statements around people, and the ways in which he would call people names and say things that just were never acceptable in that space.
Do you think that was something new to this country's politics?
I wouldn't say it's something new. Obviously, politics has always been a certain level of dirty in messaging, but I think it was new in the sense that um, the ways in which what he was saying and what he was doing was very flagrant. It was a different level of anger, hatred, racism. Certainly, racism has been part of our country's history. You can't disconnect that from the American story. But I think he was taking us backwards in a lot of the ways he talked about people and a lot of the ways that he disparaged people. And I saw it create a fracture even in the church, not just in our country, but in the church. And I saw people that taught me what it was to love your neighbor, now saying things from their political position that were completely in conflict with their religion. And that was really hard to navigate as a pastor. And it was hard until I became a commissioner to navigate that new dynamic that existed. It was very fractured. And it was hard to hear people from a position of Christianity say very awful and hurtful things about entire people groups, to disparage people, to advocate for things that were just completely opposite of what Jesus taught. And so it became a conflict in my spirit, and it became a conflict in my work. That didn't mean I disengaged. I engaged, but it meant part of addressing that conflict was acknowledging that there may be an opportunity to do more work in challenging this person who's telling us to fear our neighbor by getting involved in the political arena. And yeah, that was a part of it. It wasn't all of it. Part of it was I just wanted, local leadership that cared about local issues. It wasn't all about, his rise to power, but I think his rise to power was an activator in that. And then what happened on January 6th and seeing what happened at our Capitol was, a big wake up call, because that's, it seems as if that could be the beginning of, the end of America, when you have people challenging the results of an election, showing up and forcibly entering into the Capitol to stop work being done to certify an election, and then all the misinformation that followed. But not to mention assaulting police officers while they're entering and breaking in, and many of the terrible things that took place. That was, I think, a level of seriousness was unlocked when that happened. Yeah.
I think the first time I heard about you was when you ran for commissioner's um, office, and I knew your opponent
Yeah.
back then.
Yeah.
However, one of the politicians had kind of mentioned me about you, and I guess I didn't know anything about you.
Yeah.
And since then, I have seen you very proactive about some of the progressive issues like LGBTQI rights,
Yeah.
immigrant rights. Very proactive and very vocal about it.
Yeah.
I have seen you. I have seen your courage. I have seen your the way you have been loud and clear about the issues, the values that you carry. I'm curious about when I think of politics, I also think of the games that surrounds the politics.
There's a lot of those. Yeah.
How do you balance like being politically right versus being ethically, like in terms of your morality, being right morally? How do you balance that?
Wow.
Because
That's a good question.
Yeah, I'm just curious. Like you have been when I think of you, I don't see, unlike other politicians, like I don't see political games. I see more of your values,
Yeah.
what do you stand for?
Yeah. So I have this belief that you just need to tell people who you are and what you value and your position. If someone comes in my office and says, ask me for something, I'm not going to say yes and then like backtrack. Like, I try to let my yes be yes and my no be no. Like I try to let them know where I stand. And I also let them know if I don't know and I need to learn more. And I also let them know if maybe it's out of my control, but I'll support something. But so I try to shoot straight with people in every instance. And I think that keeps me from the games of like trying to, some people, when we talk about being unmasked, some people try to wear a mask whenever someone asks them to do something or whenever someone asks them to help their community or something like that. And they use that as another lever of manipulation and power and, way to get what they want if they give them what they want. And that's just never how I've operated. And so I always try to enter in with a sense of, learn more about the project. How can I help? What is my role in supporting this? Is this something I want to support? Is this something I don't want to support? And if I don't want to support it, I'll tell you. And that's frustrated some people, but ultimately, I think they respect me when they leave my office because they're like, at least he told us where he stands on the issue. You know what I mean? But more often than not, if they have a good idea and they want to do something in the community, I'm ready to help and use the resources of our office to move it forward. I think that helps me stay away from the games. Look, I'm running for Congress right now. There's a lot of games. It's constant games, and so to a certain extent, you got to be on the field playing the games, like because it's part of the game. It's part of the thing, right? And I like competition. I'm a competitive person. I mean, CrossFit's kind of a competition-based fitness. You know what I mean? And I grew up playing basketball. I grew up playing baseball. I'm football. I love competition. If you and I were to play a board game or something, I'd be all in trying to beat you. You know what I mean? Like, so I like to win. I like to fight and I like to, compete. But one thing that I don't want to do is disparage people personally, in that process. And I think a lot of what we've seen in our politics is people who, when you talk about what you're talking about, integrity and other things, they cross lines without really thinking twice. And so for me, I want to debate ideas. If you have an idea on how to fix a problem and I have an idea on how to fix a problem and they're very different ideas, I'd love to sit down at a microphone and talk to you about it. Or I'd love to bring you in my office and talk about how my idea is better than yours and compete around ideas to solve problems instead of competing as, who's the better communicator or who's the better this or who's the better that. But unfortunately, those are sometimes part of the political games you're going to play. You're going to have people accuse you of being the worst person in the world because they don't like you because of something you said or something you did or something you didn't support or something you did support. Part of the challenge in politics is also, I might be a friend of yours right now, right? Mm-hmm. And then someone sees this, but they don't like you. Right. So now they don't like me because I sat with you. Right. And like you deal with those kind of things. And I tell people, look, I'm with, I give everybody an open door into a relationship with me and I don't judge them off their relationships with other people. Like I judge you off you. And so those are the ways maybe I move a little bit different than others, but I don't always get it right either. Like I don't want to act like I'm some, standard or perfect. Like I definitely look back at leadership decisions I've made or even things I've said and say, I could have said that better. I could have been more gracious or I could have been more understanding. And I'm learning, and I have a mindset in my life to be a constant learner, learning about myself and learning about my role and learning about my responsibility. And so that's kind of how I approach it.
Mm-hmm. If you had to think about your time as a county commissioner, mm-hmm. What do you think is the best decision that you made or the best action you took as a county commissioner?
That's a good question. Can I give 3? Let me give 3.
Sure.
Okay. So in our prison, we used to have what's called a pay to stay policy, which meant every day that you were in prison, you would pay a fee, $5 a day. And you wouldn't pay it because you didn't have money to pay it. It would just go on your books. And if your family wanted to give you money, let's say your family wanted to give you $100, we would take $50 of that to apply it to the fee.
Interesting.
And then when you left the prison, you would have thousands of dollars of debt a lot of times. And when I got into office, we realized that number was over $65 million that was out in the community of debt. And so I worked really hard my first year to abolish that debt. So just get rid of all that debt for all those people. We were investing millions of dollars in reentry or hundreds of thousands of dollars in reentry, but we were burdening people with this debt when they left. And so thankfully, I was able to get the prison board to vote on that and then the commissioners to ratify it. And it was all that debt was relieved for those
And why
people.
why was that important for you?
Because people often our criminal justice system impacts people who are already dealing with poverty. And when they enter back into the community, we want them to have opportunities, not be further burdened. When, when we talk about like criminogenic behavior, like people who commit crimes, like poverty is a big part of that. You know what I mean? When you have no options, no access to resources, you're far more likely to commit crime. And so people coming out of incarceration, I wanted them to have the option for housing, the option for getting a job, the option for having transportation to that job, and having debt on top of whatever personal debt you have. You might also have medical debt and credit card debt and all kinds of other debt. Now you also have this debt from Dauphin County. And that could keep you from getting a house. That could keep you from buying or from even signing a lease for an apartment. It could keep you from signing an agreement to have a vehicle. It could keep you from a lot of things. And so it was really important to me to remove those barriers so that people can reenter our society. And so anyone who believes in public safety should be for that because it actually makes our communities safer. Mm-hmm. It's more likely that that person's not going to commit a crime again if we can put them on the right path. And also, I think the year that I came in as commissioner, we had $65 million out there and we had only received 30,000 of that money back. Mm-hmm. So like it wasn't even money we were ever going to get returned to the county. And the impact it has as being forgiven is far greater than the impact, of the pennies that we would get back because we're, basically asking people who have no resources to pay this back. So that's why it was important to me. And I think it was very important to the community. I heard from a lot of community members that felt like that was really valuable.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to come back to the criminal justice system.
Yeah.
What's your number two?
Oh, yeah. So number two, voting access. So we had 2 ballot drop boxes in the county when I got in there. And we now have 7 ballot drop boxes. So just basically making it to where people who have a mail-in ballot who maybe don't want to put it in the mail, but would prefer putting it in a drop box where it's, their ballot goes straight to the drop box and then the elections office picks it up from there. That was really important to have more of those. And we also implemented ballot curing in that as well. The third would be a $16 minimum wage for our county employees. So when I came in, we had county workers who had worked at the county for over 10 years and were making $11 an hour. And, it's impossible to live on $11 an hour. And so raising that to $16 was, I think, just a basement, if you will, of our pay that honors our employees and all their work that they do to keep the county going.
Mm-hmm. And when you had to pass through these issues, I'm curious about the circumstances of decision making. Was it easy for you, or was it challenging? Because there are, you're from Democratic Party, right? Mm-hmm. There are Republican commissioners as well.
Yeah,
and, how was it?
Yeah, look, anytime you have to try to advocate for something that you want to see changed, sometimes that requires conversations of, compromise, whether that's, supporting someone on a vote that you wouldn't traditionally support them on if they'll vote with you on this, or, trying to figure out ways to convince them the value of this vote. Every one of those votes was different. Some of them were easier than others. But, that's part of, democratic leadership. It's part of democracy. It's part of, we each have a part in representing the people who put us here, and we each interpret what the people want differently and what our mandate is in our role. And so for some people, like here's an example, I've brought forth a welcoming county policy because I don't think our county should be working with ICE in any capacity unless they have a judicial warrant. And so that's an example of something I've brought forth that did not get voted, on. It was, not seconded by another commissioner, so it didn't ever see the floor. But I'm still proud that I brought that, and I'm proud of all the work I did. And there was a lot of concessions in that, like I started with a welcoming county policy that looked very different with what, I brought on the floor to try to get more people to buy into it. And it still was unsuccessful. But that's part of politics. I watch football, sometimes you score a touchdown. Every time you go down the field, you want to score a touchdown, but sometimes you score a touchdown. Sometimes you kick a field goal. Sometimes you punt the ball. Sometimes you turn it over to the other team. Not every drive can be a touchdown, but you certainly want to set out with the mindset that, you're going to be in the end zone with every one of your objectives.
You talked about the welcoming policy. Some of our partner organizations were also involved into it.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if you can elaborate more on that. What it meant for you? I know it didn't pass through, but do you plan to bring that up again? Or
Yeah, I do plan to bring it up again. I think what we've seen is, when I brought that last time, we've had a lot of community outrage about ICE even further since then. We've seen this particular administration's ways of using ICE in a way that harms people to the extent of even, executing people on the streets of the United States. We saw with Alex Preddy and with Renee Good, it wasn't enough to do that. They also had to assassinate their character after the fact. And I think we're just seeing a level of a lack of human dignity in the way that they're doing their enforcement, that more and more people, I think, are wanting to see something like a welcoming county policy where we refuse to cooperate with ICE unless they have a judicial warrant. And so it's certainly something I plan to continue to advocate for. Whether or not, I think it was 2 meetings ago, I made a public statement about Alex Preddy after that happened. And I said to my colleagues that my door was always open if they were ever open to a welcoming county policy. So I've made it clear that I'm ready to pass that if one of them are willing. But as things continue to escalate, I have no problem bringing that for a motion again to see if my colleagues might join me in that.
So it didn't pass through. Does that mean the county is going to cooperate with ICE?
The county does actively cooperate with ICE. Like that's part of what we do through our prison and through other agencies. If ICE reaches out or if someone has, a reason to reach out to ICE, there's nothing inhibiting them from doing that. Yeah. And that's part of what I was trying to get ahead of with the welcoming county policy, was trying to put some boundaries around that. Yeah.
That brings me to the bigger picture, the way this current administration, the federal administration, is framing the narrative around we have an immigration crisis in this country. How do you see about that? Do you think is there an immigration crisis in this country?
Well, I think that depends on how you interpret crisis, the word crisis. So I think I would say, sure, yeah, there's an immigration crisis. And here's the crisis. The crisis is that there are a lot of unstable countries who have challenges where people have left those countries and sought asylum in America. And under the first Trump administration, there wasn't really much acceptance of asylum seekers. And now when Biden got into power, there was an open door for asylum seekers, and you had many asylum seekers enter our country, not illegally. And it's very important that we say this. They did not enter illegally. They entered on pre-authorization status of asylum to then stand before a judge and prove their asylum after the fact. And so they entered into our country with papers, with documentation for a future court date. And I think one of the challenges is our immigration courts are flooded with hearings, and it can take people years to get in front of a judge. And in that time, they have the opportunity to be here, work, pay taxes. They are paying taxes. Like they have documentation. Now, the challenge is immigration sits at the executive level. So it's the president's prerogative. So if a president comes in, wants to let no one in, they can. If another president wants to come in and let everybody in, they can, like in the sense of anybody seeking asylum. And so that policy, what we're seeing now is individuals come in to power who want to basically remove everybody who's here seeking asylum, and do so in a way that treats them like criminals. 92% of the people that ICE has detained or deported are not criminals. Mm-hmm. Like, if they want to get the worst of the worst off the street, who are criminals and who have done harm in our communities, my door's open in my office. Come sit down and talk to me. Tell me the worst people in Dauphin County. Show me their criminal records. I'm not going to let a welcoming county policy stand in the way of addressing crime. I voted to add 2 people to our gang violence task force in a budget. And I'm proud of that, because we have gangs in Harrisburg, and we need the resources to ensure that our public's safe. Mm-hmm. That's not what their motive is, though. Their motive seems to be really fueled by racism, I think, first, fueled by making immigrants out to be, look, when Trump first came to power and he came down the escalator, he called, they're sending us their rapists, their murderers, you had J.D. Vance talk about how they're, in Ohio, they're eating dogs and cats. There's just this way of othering people that is, absolutely abhorrent, and it's terrible to see. And that seems to be fueling their agenda more so than the numbers or the reality of crime. If there's people here on green cards, on asylum seeking status and other things that have committed crimes in our communities, they should be prosecuted to the full extent of the law. And they should be removed from the country if it's a violation of, their rights here, or their ability to come here as an immigrant. And there should be consequences. I'm in 100% agreement of that. But when you arrest 92%, detain or deport 92% of people who haven't committed a crime, you can't also say what you're trying to do is remove criminals from the street, because that's not true. And so the numbers just are line up to say they have an agenda. So is it a crisis? It's a crisis in the sense that all the power sits at the executive branch, and they can do what they want without any accountability. And that's why I'm trying to go to Congress, because I think Congress needs to do more to hold the executive branch accountable for the ways in which they're enforcing immigration. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And if you're elected as a congressman, how do you see yourself kind of making an impact, the change that you would like to see?
So the number one thing I would do is I would say we need to put in, I think Section 1983, we have a law that allows for civil recourse on law enforcement. So basically, if an officer assaults you and you want to bring a civil case against that officer, you're by federal statute allowed to do that. You're allowed to bring recourse to that officer. Or if they wrongfully kill a member of your family, you're able to bring a lawsuit against that officer in civil court. When they made that law only apply to states and municipalities. It did not apply to the federal government. And so we can have one line that Congress passes that simply says to include federal law enforcement. If that line was in there, people would have the ability to hold them accountable for what they're doing, for the constitutional violations that they have, by civil recourse, by basically suing them in civil court. I think that's a big start that we can do. Now, the president will veto that. So it might take, 2 years till we have a different president to actually to actually enact that change, but you should put him on the record of vetoing it. He's vetoing accountability for law enforcement. I think we can do things like, unmasking our officers. If you're driving down the street in whatever municipality in Dauphin County, the police aren't wearing masks. They're wearing badges that have their name on it, or that have their number on it, and they're wearing Velcro patches that have their last name on them. Mm-hmm. They're easily identifiable as who they are. That's because the very first tool that we give law enforcement is trust. And the idea that you violate that by being masked and in our streets, doing things that are violating people's rights without any recourse of even knowing who's doing it, that's a real problem. And that needs to be addressed by Congress. And then I think Congress has the authority of how much money we give ICE, because ultimately they're the ones who delegate the money. And so we need to put people there that refuse to fund the violation of our constitutional rights. And so I've only taken 2 oaths in my entire lifetime, an oath to my wife, and I put my hand on the Bible and took an oath to the Constitution when I became a commissioner. And I take both those oaths very seriously. And our Constitution is being violated by this administration, and we need to send people there who are going to address it with the urgency it requires.
Mm-hmm. I'm curious, if you're elected as congressman, what we see right now is the executive branch kind of trying to expand its influence power, and not quite taking care of, not quite kind of paying attention to the legislative branch and the judiciary branch, or they have control over those branches as well.
Yeah, that too. Yeah.
I'm curious, how do you see yourself kind of bringing or maintaining check and balances? I mean, I came from an autocratic monarchical country, where king is the ruler.
Yeah.
And everything goes through king, right? However, when I came to this country, I think one of the beautiful thing about this country is the structure around check and balance, right? And right now, I think that is not the case, right? So I'm curious, how do you try to bring back that power to these branches?
Yeah, I think the very first thing I would say is we need leaders who know how to communicate to people. We need leaders who know how to use platforms like social media to get the message out, because Congress needs to talk about what authority is being stripped of them, if it is being stripped. Does that make sense? It needs to be something the American people are aware of, and that they know that this president is acting like a king, and we don't do that in this country. And that's not how we lead in this country. We lead through the consensus of the 3 branches of government, not through the consensus of one. And so I think the first thing is around messaging and just saying we need leaders who know how to communicate so that people in the busy lives they hold. Look, the single mom working 2 jobs, trying to get their kid picked up and get, dinner and breakfast on the table and make sure they're driven to soccer practice and all the other things they got going on. They don't have time to be aware of what's happening in Washington because they're too busy. They're just trying to survive, right? But we need leaders who break through and give them a reason to engage and give them a reason to understand that what's happening in Washington is going to have a big impact on who we are as America if we don't all turn our eyes to this and condemn it for what it is. So I think we need compelling leaders who can inspire people to get involved, even when they have low capacity to get involved. Then I think we need leaders who are courageous, who stand up to power, who aren't afraid to call things out when they're happening, and investigate every lever of power that they have and use every lever of power that they have to fight the executive branch where necessary. And so I think we've seen what trying to compromise with this executive has done, and it hasn't worked. And so we need people who get in those positions who are not willing to compromise the Constitution to get something else they want. That has not worked, and it never was going to work. And anyone who compromises and draws the line in the sand somewhere, this administration just crosses that line in the next few days. Like it's not the type of thing that we can, we have to go with a principled style of leadership with values that we're there to defend. And I think it's as much a mindset and approach as it is what we can accomplish. Because the truth of the matter is, in the first 2 years, or the next 2 years after 26 election, there might not be much that gets accomplished in way of legislation, because it's going to have to be signed by the executive branch, whatever gets accomplished. But there can be oversight hearings. You can call people in front of Congress. You can expose what they're doing. You can make the American people aware. And so I think those are the ways in which I see myself positioned as a fighter to fight for those opportunities.
How hopeful are you? Like you talked about social media, the messaging, and something that concerns me is how the concentration of the power, how the administration or the political power is connected to this tech giants and their influence in politics. And now we're talking about AI, building data centers, and how very handful of these people are kind of every day becoming wealthier. And then the way they try to influence politics and power. How hopeful are you? Do you see light at the end?
I have to be hopeful, because if I'm not hopeful, then why am I wasting my time? If I don't think this can be course corrected, if I don't think we can get back on track, if I don't think there's a way of fixing this broken system, I tell people Washington's broken, but it's not on accident. It's by design. Like, we've given people power and authority, and they've created a system and structure where rich people get the biggest benefit. And that's because those same rich people are the donors to their campaigns. Like, my campaign won't take corporate PAC money. Like, we're not taking any money from any corporate PACs, period. So if an AI company wants to come give me $100,000, I'm going to say no. I'll build a relationship with them. I want to understand what they need. They're part of our economy. They're part of, but I have to regulate that system as a congressman. I get to vote on legislation to regulate that system. I should not be taking money from that person.
But there is a price that you have to pay,
right? To run for office, it costs money. Yeah. But that's a whole nother system that needs reformed. We have people raising millions and millions of dollars to run for office, and the average person can't do that. And so
you're talking about the Citizens United.
Yeah, Citizens United. And
can you elaborate more?
Yeah, so Citizens United was a ruling of the courts to determine that, money represents speech, and they're not going to limit the speech of corporations. And so corporations basically are able to create a super PAC now and fund campaigns with millions of dollars. You saw Elon Musk drop millions of dollars into Wisconsin judicial race. Why does he care about the Wisconsin judicial race? Like, this person doesn't set policy for his companies, but it was a way of, it's a drop in the bucket for him. It's like, probably, when I look at my checking account, it's probably would be like me handing somebody a dime is him handing someone $1 million. So, we have to be cautious on what that influence means. If we become an oligarchy, if we allow rich people to run our country and influence all of our elections. And so we have to create, legislation around that. And so the challenge with Citizens United is the only way that gets undone is through a constitutional amendment. That's going to take time. Constitutional amendments don't happen overnight. They take a lot of time to form. And you have to build bipartisan consensus for that kind of a thing to happen. But more and more people are becoming aware that we have a broken system on both sides. And so I'm fully in favor of a constitutional amendment to fix Citizens United and get money out of politics. But the other option is to, one of the things Congress can do is limit spending in campaigns. They can't limit how much money you give a campaign, but they can limit how much they spend. So one option, for example, would be, we're in PA's 10th district in Congress. Like, what I think the average household or median income is like $60,000 or something like that. Let's say congressmen running or people running for Congress in PA 10 can only spend double the average median income. So $120,000. Well, you can raise millions of dollars, but you can only spend 120. Like, there's ways we can be creative and do those kinds of things, because that's not actually limiting anyone's influence. It wouldn't be a violation of Citizens United. So there's creative ways that people have thought about how we can put limits on money's influence in politics. The problem is the people making the decisions are all the ones who have benefited from that system. And so, this is why it matters that we have term limits on people as well. And we, elect people to office who are really trying to work for the common good of the people instead of the common good of their own pocketbooks. On day one, if I was to become a congressman, I would co-sign legislation to ban stock trading, for example. We have multiple people in Congress on both sides of the aisle who trade stocks and are aware of inside information. If Palantir is going to get a government contract, you might know 3 days before, and you buy some Palantir stock, and you make millions of dollars off of that. Is that allowed? Is that something that should be allowed? Absolutely not. Everyone I talk to, whether they're Republican, Independent, or Democrat, they're like, that's messed up. The overwhelming majority of Americans think you should not be allowed to trade stocks if you're in that position. So it's the same way as if you play in the NBA, you can't bet on the game. Like, you know what I mean? You don't get a bet on the game that you're playing in. And so we have to bring that kind of, those kinds of decisions too, because people don't trust politicians. They think they're only there for themselves. And unfortunately, a lot of the time, that's true.
Mm-hmm. I'm curious, let's say a young individual who aspires to bring changes through politics.
Yeah.
And they hear about all this, how power, politics, and money are interconnected. And it can feel quite frustrating.
100%. Yeah.
Like if you don't have money, if you don't come from wealthy background, and talking about how money plays, like what kind of role money plays in politics. Mm-hmm. And you talked about the prison reforms. Mm-hmm. And when I look at prison reforms as well, the industrial prison system, how everything is industrialized.
Yeah, the for-profit prison motive. Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
What would you tell that individual? Like, what would be your advice?
Yeah. So my advice to a young person getting engaged in politics, maybe for the first time, would be to first register to vote. There's 2 elections every year and maybe even more if there's a special runoff election. So you have an election in the spring and an election in the fall every single year, and you should vote every single time. And you should try to meet every single candidate that you're going to vote for. These are local leaders, some of which aren't getting paid any money to have the position they have. They are true public servants, many of them. They give of their time, energy, and effort, and they're not getting even paid for it, And then there's people like me that's a commissioner. My job is a full-time job. I get paid to come to work to do this work. And then there's people at the federal level who get paid even more, and they have even more engagement in, the federal politics. And obviously the state as well. So you have all these different layers of leadership. And I think, trying to get to understand, like, hey, what does a township commissioner do? What does a county commissioner do? What does a controller do? What does a prothonotary do? Just begin learning about all those things. Google it, and see what it says that they do. And then try to meet those candidates. And, if you're passionate about particular ideas or ideals that you want them to hold, communicate that to them, see where they stand, ask them hard questions, because if anyone's going to run for office and ask you to vote for them, they should be able to answer your questions, and they should be able to show up and be accessible to you, because how they run for office, whether or not they're accessible, is how they're going to lead. So if they're not accessible to you before they ever get into office, they're probably not going to be accessible when they get into office. So those are some things I would say. And then here's what I would say. Try to talk to your friends about it. Try to create a group that, works together to address the problems that you're passionate about. Align with other groups that are already in existence. Like ARU would be one, for example, like others. But like, there's all different kinds of groups that are doing work that you might not even be aware of is happening in your community. Find those groups, go to their meetings, learn about how you can help, and start being the solution to the problem and using your voice and your vote to do that. Look, money is very influential, but here's one thing money can't do. Money can't vote. People vote. And so never forget that you have power with that vote. And many people in America have fought hard for you to retain that power and have that power. And so don't forfeit that power because of your apathy for what's happening in our country. If anything, it's more reason to grab hold of it and to tell all your friends to grab hold of it, to register your friends, to have a plan to vote, and to be an informed voter.
Mm-hmm. So you're running for Congress from District 10.
Yeah.
I'm curious, when you meet your constituents, what are the common issues that you hear from them?
Well, I think one of the things I hear is about federal overreach, which we've already addressed. Affordability is another big one. Mm-hmm. The cost of everything continues to go up, but in Pennsylvania alone, $7.25 is the minimum wage right now, and so that's not, as the costs rise, that doesn't necessarily mean wages are rising with the cost. Getting into a home is a lot harder. Buying groceries every week is a lot more challenging. And then I would say, they mention, the reality of things like ICE, things like, healthcare. These are other big buckets that people are very concerned about. Healthcare is the leading cause of bankruptcy in America right now. Medical debt is. And so if we don't, solve this problem, we're going to continue to bankrupt Americans while, billionaires get more and more wealthy. And we're not investing in solutions for it. We're kind of just continuing to kick the can down the road on healthcare. And we have to fix this system. Other countries have fixed it, and other countries are in a place where they, are able to have a system that works for everyone. And they see healthcare as a right for people to have. And I think we need to get to that place too.
Mm-hmm. I'm curious, in District 10, thousands of Nepali-speaking Buddhist community members live, right? And I do see you, your presence in many of the Buddhist community spaces. Mm-hmm. I'm curious what you know about Buddhist community.
Yeah, so prior to becoming a commissioner, a little bit on the campaign trail, I learned a little bit, but I learned a lot more after I became a commissioner. I know it's a very resilient community who dealt with the loss of their, homeland and where they, many of them where they were either born or where their ancestors were from. I know they spent many of them decades in refugee camp in Nepal, and have come here with that same resilient spirit to invest in America and have America invest in them, and just looking for opportunity. And I've got to know a little bit of the bipartisan story of George W. Bush being the first to, accept the Bhutanese Nepali community, and then that continued to grow under Obama's leadership, and the other countries that were a part of that, I believe, maybe New Zealand, Australia, Canada, some European countries, all, took refugees. Mm-hmm. And so I've been as informed as I could be. I know the persecution was somewhat similar to what we're seeing with ICE, people asking for people's papers and the line continuing to move. First it was a certain group, and then it became a larger group, and then it became a larger group. And, I'm no expert, but that's probably the basics of what I know. But I would say my experience with the community has been individuals who are very kind, very generous, want to serve their community, have come from immense hardship, things that I could never relate to. I've never lived in a refugee camp with the minimal resources that exist there, and have come here looking for opportunity. And many of those individuals have provided greatly for PA-10, like their stories and their contribution to this region should be shared. It should not be vilified, or it shouldn't be the thing that we are trying to like point out as a negative, because there's so many positives happening in this community.
Mhm. Last year, we saw more than 70 Nepali speaking witness community members who were detained and deported to Bhutan. Um, and maybe about 20 of them were from central PA. And if I remember correctly, pretty much you were the only one who was vocal about this action taken by this current administration. I'm curious, like, I mean, we did reach out to other politicians as well, and they were kind of like the reason that they put us brought forward was around like our hands are tied, we can't do anything because it's federal. But you were very vocal and out there in the public. Why was it important for you? Do you regret doing that?
Oh, I don't regret it at all. No. If anything, I think when you asked what's the most important thing that I've passed in legislation, this didn't apply because it's not something I passed legislation for, right? But if you were to ask me what's the most important thing I've done as a commissioner, this might be it. I think we need to stand up for people's rights, even when we might not be the people who get a say, right? Yeah. Could I change the outcomes? No. But I could give voice to the injustice. I could give a path to family members to get access. So, my office doesn't have to do this, but when people reach out to us and tell us that someone was detained, we help them navigate the federal system. We partner with a number of organizations that are doing that work to try to just information share and help, because it's so complicated and convoluted that many people, they don't know how to help their family member who's detained, or how to get a lawyer, or where to go next. And so we point them in the right direction and we help them. The initial 5 Bhutanese Nepali individuals who were detained and ultimately deported, during that time, we were first. That was our first interaction with ICE, you know what I mean, in our office. And it was unprecedented because these are people here on refugee status. Some of the most vetted, statuses that you have in an immigration system is refugee status. And so, trying to figure out what the ultimate goal was, but then realizing that the goal was to deport these individuals. And then we had family members who showed up to visit them who were denied visitations because of whatever reason. And, I knew I couldn't do anything to stop their deportation. I didn't have that power, but I wanted to make sure these family members got a chance to visit their families. And so when they prepped them for deportation, they moved them to a county jail. And I reached out to our warden of our county to see if he had a relationship with the warden in the other county. And he did. And I asked, is there any way we can, have a visitation, because these family members didn't get to say goodbye to their loved ones. And, I went with that caravan of people to go out to that county jail. I think it was a couple hours away. And it wasn't Moshannon. They were at Moshannon, and then they got moved to a county jail. I forget which county it was, but it was up near. It was in northeastern PA somewhere. So we went over there, which was like I said, a couple hours away. And because they had tried to go to Moshannon to visit them, and they were not able to, because I think they were either there on the wrong day or the wrong time.
Was it Pike?
It was Pike. Yeah, I think it was Pike. Yeah. So we went to Pike and Pike County and visited. And, that was something I'm incredibly grateful for our warden and using his relationship to get that door open. But then when I went there, I watched people walk out of the visitation room in tears, knowing that it was the last time they were going to see their family member. And, you know, that hurts. And I only feel a small measure of hurt. This isn't my loved one, but I have 3 kids. I have family that I love deeply that I could never imagine saying goodbye to potentially for the rest of their life and my life. And that weight and that moment and that experience will stick with me for the rest of my life. More than a $16 minimum wage. I mean, I'm thankful for that, but it's not the same. And so, yeah, I don't regret it at all. I think it's the type of leader I want to be. And if people are offended by that or think I'm, too bold or out there and I shouldn't talk to issues, then they can elect somebody else. But as long as I'm in this seat, I'm going to use every lever I have to try to help my constituents when they have issues. And this was an issue that was unlike any other one that I've experienced.
If you have to look at your life from birth to where you are right now, and if I ask you, what is your story? How would you
That's good.
yeah, how would you respond to that? What is
Wow, we do a lot of media prep, but I don't do any prep for these questions. These are good questions.
Thank you.
How would I look at my story if I looked over my life? Oh man. I think just trying to learn how to be the best man I can be, best person I can be, the best contributor to helping others that I can be. Again, I just want to emphasize, I'm no hero. I fail at that all the time. I think number one, I would want to be known as being a good husband to my wife, being a good father to my kids, and then, supporting other people, serving other people in my capacity at work, but also in my capacity in life. I was taught on the farm hard work, but I was also taught to look out for my neighbor. And that's a principle that's carried through childhood into my adult life. And it's one that I don't think I'll ever let go of. So, that's how I look back on my life. And as I've been granted more and more responsibility throughout my life, or more and more influence or authority, I've tried to lead with that in mind.
So you are a white male commissioner,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm sure that it has its own power and privilege.
Yeah,
Right.
certainly.
I'm curious how you navigate that power and privilege that comes with who you are.
Yeah. So, and I could speak more narratively to this. Like, the first time I heard the N word, for example, in my context was, from my grandfather. I grew up around a lot of racism in Indiana. And I went to a school where that wasn't really challenged. You know what I mean? I grew up, there was a lot of racism at the school I went to. Even when I went to Northern Virginia, I didn't really have to confront racism. I wasn't confronted by racism. Being white and a male and privileged kept me very insulated from that in a very predominantly white part of Northern Virginia. When I went to Boston, I lived in a community called Dorchester, and I think at the time it's been gentrified since, but at the time it was largely African American and Dominican American. I think something like 80 to 90% of the people there. And I was living in a house owned by the Salvation Army with 20 other people. So it was like community style living, intentional living. And I was working for an organization where I was interacting with African American and Dominican American people literally every day, serving them. People that, just to be honest, I was taught to fear growing up, that I was now forming relationships with and being provided a whole different perspective than and a perspective about the poverty and the circumstances of the city in Boston, and the racism that Boston has a long storied history of challenges around race. And so my time there really kind of was very challenging internally, to learn about much of my own internal thoughts, my own internal bias, my own internal racism, and set me on a path to really work hard to undo a lot of that. After my time there, I started reading more of Martin Luther King Jr.'s books. I read probably the most formative book that really challenged me was Michelle Alexander's book, The New Jim Crow, which basically just talks about how incarceration has become the new, segregation, and emphasized a lot about racism in our culture and in the context and structures and systems that get applied to it. And that set me on a journey to try my best to reveal my internal biases. Look, that does not mean though that I always get it right. I'm trying to constantly be aware of the ways in which I have my own stuff that might come up that I might be unaware of. I'm very much a straight shooter. I have no problem taking charge. I have no problem stepping up. And, sometimes when I'm in rooms with other people, I can dominate conversations. I can not allow other people the opportunity to speak and not be aware of that, just because I'm thinking efficiently. I'm thinking like, how do we get through this conversation? How do we keep going? So I've had to be very honest with myself and my preferences or my, biases, and try to ensure that every voice in the room is being elevated, to ensure that other experiences and other people who have other experiences are given the opportunity to share from their perspective, because it should not just be my perspective. But that requires a lot of work, and I try to be as aware as I can of the power that I hold. And again, I have people who check me regularly on that, because there's certain people in my life that I've given the ability to, for lack of a better term, call me out and tell me. And whenever they do, even if initially I'm like, no, that's not what's happening here, I usually say I'm going to sit with it for 24 hours and really try to think through and try to spend some time in silence and thought about what my motives are, and if it was coming from that place. So I try to be aware of it, but I'm also aware that there's a system that long predates me that, is software, if you will, that's internal, like to white privilege. And if I'm not aware of it as I move as a leader, it just takes over as the default. And so I try to stay as aware as I can.
Mm-hmm. Cool. The final question I have for you is, what is one question that your voters, that you think you wish your voters would have asked but have not asked you?
Oh, a question I wish they would have asked but have not asked me. I've been asked a lot of questions because we've done like 6 town halls. So I got to think about this one. What question do I wish they would have asked that they have not asked me? What kind of music do you like? No. Maybe no, I'm just kidding. That might be a question out. No. I would say the question that I wish they would have asked that they maybe haven't asked was asked in this. What do you consider your life's legacy? Like that question you asked me, I think is really important, because I'll be honest. When you asked it, I was kind of like, wow, I haven't even really stopped and thought about this for a while. I used to have a practice, a journal practice, where I would create like 4 core values for the year. And every day I would open and read those core values for the year. And then I would create the 5th value, or the 5th thing would be like an anchor of the kind of person I want to be known for. Mm-hmm. And I would start my day off every day reading that, and then trying to enter into my to-do list with that in mind. Right. And so that's a practice I've gotten away from, but it almost felt reflective of that practice when you asked that question of, recentering me. So that's not a question I've got on the campaign trail or from any constituents until now. And that's one that I need to do more reflecting on, like, the type of person I am and the type of person I want to be remembered for. And I think we're all better when we're thinking about how we're going to be remembered. You know what I mean? We're all better when we have a picture, a vision of our life, and we're making decisions from that place instead of in the immediate, in the emotion. Running a campaign and being a commissioner, I could, as soon as I get out of this interview, turn on my phone and there could be a crisis that I got to go jump into right away and react immediately and make decisions and go. And that doesn't always give you the ability to think on a macro scale of your life. And so that's a question that, I value. Thanks for giving it.
Yeah. And thanks for agreeing to be on Unmasked.